In this video, we're going to go through truth tables. Now, the purpose of this is I'm just giving you a very small introduction to truth tables. So that way, when you go through the lecture, it doesn't feel so foreign. Truth tables kind of throw students a little bit because it's kind of a new idea, and therefore it kind of gives them a little bit of a tough time. So trying to rip the band-aid off here and give you an opportunity to see truth tables ahead of time. So first thing, I need to define what a proposition is. So a proposition is a complete sentence that can be true or false. Oops, that's not how you spell sentence. A complete sentence that can be true or false. And because it can be true or false, there's already like some things that like disqualified, right? So like a question would not be a proposition because a question can't be true or false. Okay. Opinions, by the way, do count as a proposition. Okay. So here, let me give a couple examples of propositions. So pine trees grow in Oregon. Okay. So that is a sentence that can have a truth or false according to that the way it is written. Wow, that's a very weird O. Let's make it look a little better. There we go, Oregon. Okay, another example would be math is fun. That would work. That would be a proposition as well. It is an opinion, so therefore it could possibly be true or false based on who might be saying it. But it does have it's a complete sentence and it has a true or false element to it. Okay, so with that basic idea of propositions, a truth table displays all possibilities of complex statements with multiple propositions or possibly just one proposition, but that kind of gets boring. So here, let me actually write that down. So a truth table displays all possibilities, sorry, of complex statements. That's their goal. And really, truth tables get used a lot in computer science and programming. Okay, they kind of give a way for a computer to figure out whether or not something works or doesn't work. And they have good use in arguments. Okay, so here, let me give an example of what you might see in a truth table. So let's say for a second that we have these two propositions. Let's say R is the proposition that the rent is paid. Okay, and then let's say E is the proposition that the electricity is paid. And I'm talking about the bill. Okay. So a truth table, and we'll take these two propositions, and we have ways that these could be true or false in combinations thereof. Okay. So it's possible that both statements are true. In other words, both the rent and the electricity is paid. It's possible that just the rent is paid and the electricity is not paid. It's possible the rent is not paid, but the electricity is paid. And then it's possible that both of them were not paid. All right, so there you go. That's kind of the basic start of a truth table. We look at all possibilities of what could happen with these two propositions. Okay, now combining the two propositions together is kind of the goal. But before I do that, I want you to kind of see there's a pattern going on in this truth table. So notice the first statement I wrote here, it with true, true, and then false, false. Whereas the second statement, I alternated between true, false, true, false. That's a pattern that is often followed. And I'm pointing that out because, especially when you do some homework with this, you might need to write that pattern down. And now you kind of have seen it. Okay, so let's kind of talk about different ways we can look at these propositions and combine them together. So the first idea that we explore, and it's a basic one, is the negation of a proposition. Wow, that's not how you spell proposition. Proposition. Okay. So, this is actually extremely basic. If R happens to be that the rent is paid, then the negation of this would label not R, and that would mean rent is not paid. And there you kind of go with the basic of that negation. Here's what the truth table looks like for it. So, since I'm talking about R and the negation of R, really there's only two things to look at: when R is true and when R is false. So the negation of R when it's true ends up being a false statement. And the negation of R if it's false ends up being a true statement. So in other words, it's doing the opposite. It's changing from true to false depending on what originally R is. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's say we want to combine propositions. And there's really two ways we do that. We combine them. That's not true. There's actually three ways. I take that back. Three ways we do that. So first, we do what's called the and statement. In this case, and I'm going to kind of just jump to the truth table here, we have the idea that we have these two propositions and we want to combine them together. Okay. Now, and as you kind of understand it to be, means both things occur, right? So if you say, I paid the rent and I paid the electricity, that means both bills got paid. Okay, that statement means both got paid. Okay, so if both statements here, I'm going to actually write true, true, false, false, and then true, false, true, false. Okay, so if you happen to pay the rent and the electricity, and you said that in an and statement, that means the and statement is true because both were paid. If you happen to only pay the rent, not pay the electricity, but the and statement then would be false, because now we're saying, when we say and, the rent is paid and the electricity is paid, but you didn't pay the electricity, obviously that's a false statement now. And then that works the other way as well, that this is false if you didn't pay the rent. And it's definitely false if neither of them got paid. Okay. So the and joins the two propositions together into a strong statement. The only time and ends up being true is when both of the original propositions are true. Another type of proposition that we combine, or combination of them, is or. Or is a lot more flexible. In an or statement, it's possible that only one is true. When you say I paid the rent or I paid the electricity, that changes now whether or not we have true or false. Okay. If that's a true statement or a false statement. Okay, so here we go. I paid the rent or I paid the electricity, and they both happen to be true statements. This is a true statement. It's a little bit weird to use an or in that statement, but it's true because both are paid, and therefore when you say or, it works. In the second one, if you only paid the rent, not the electricity, but you're saying or, it's still true. The truth still holds because you did pay the rent. Same with the next statement. In this case, we're saying that we paid the electricity, but not the rent. Okay. And that or statement there, I paid the rent or the electricity, works. But if you didn't pay either of them, that's a false statement. And therefore, the or statement allows more true outcomes than the and statement. So the and is more strict than the or. Okay. It has a stricter rules. Both have to be true in order for it to work. With or, we have a little bit more flexibility. Okay. Now, the last combination of propositions we'll see is what's called the if-then format. Okay. Now, this one does get a little bit more exploration in the lecture notes, so be aware of that. If this doesn't feel super clear, you'll get a second chance to hear it. If then. Okay. So, true, true, false, false, true, false, true, false. Okay. Here we go. If I pay the rent, then I pay the electricity. Okay. So, if both of them, if it happens to be true, this is a true statement. If I pay the rent, then I pay the electricity, but I didn't pay the electricity, right? That's the next line. That's false. I failed to do what I said I was going to do. Now this one's a little interesting. So if I pay the rent, then I pay the electricity. I didn't pay the rent. So, but I did pay the electricity. So if I make this statement, it's not false because the condition of me paying the rent wasn't met. So it's almost like because that condition wasn't met, the first statement is false. This first part here is false. That kind of automatically means this doesn't lose its truth value. It stays true. I'm not lying if I say, if I pay the rent, then I pay the electricity. Okay. And same with the last one. It both happens to be false. If I pay the rent, then I pay the electricity. I didn't pay either of them. Fine. I didn't lie. So the if then format kind of comes down to the idea of there's only one case which you would be a liar, and that's this case. All right. And when I think about it, it makes sense because I'm saying if I pay the rent, then I pay the electricity. The only time that statement is going to be false is if I happen to not pay the electricity when I paid the rent. And that's the problem with it. Okay. So that's the if then format. So these are the formats you'll see in the section. I do a little bit of a worksheet to kind of talk about the verbalizing what the propositions look like for these, but that's really it. You're just going to kind of understand it a little bit, kind of get some exposure, and then hopefully when you start going through it, it's not as intense.